All right, let's dive right into this explainer on Selma Lagerlöf's classic story, The Rat Trap. It's this fascinating, almost fairy tale-esque narrative set deep in the dark iron mines of Sweden. And really, at its core, it's exploring human cynicism, the literal and metaphorical traps we fall into, and this profound idea that essential human goodness can actually be awakened. It is a truly remarkable narrative, and we're going to see exactly how Lagerlöf pulls this off.
Here is our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the Peddler's rat trap world. Then look at Bait and the Forest. Head over to the Ramjo Ironworks. Spend Christmas at the Manor. And finally wrap up with the Captain's Redemption.
So, jumping into Section 1, the Peddler's Rat Trap World. Look at this illustration. It literally perfectly captures our main character's incredibly cynical philosophy. He wanders the countryside selling these little wire rat traps that he makes himself, but one day he has this massive realization. He decides the whole world is nothing but one giant trap. All the riches, the joys, shelter, food, it's all just bait, kind of like cheese and pork in a real trap. And the second you let yourself be tempted to touch that bait, boom, it closes in on you and it's game over.
To really get inside his head, we have to look at the exact language Lagerlöf uses. The guy's business was terrible, right? So he had to resort to begging and petty thievery, literally just to keep body and soul together. Picture this guy, in rags, sunken cheeks, where hunger gleamed in his eyes. And as he plods along the road, he finds himself having fallen into a line of thought about this whole rat trap theory. Because the world was always so awful to him, it actually gave him this unwanted joy, like an unusual, twisted pleasure, to just think ill of the world and imagine other people circling the bait or getting caught in the snare.
Let's move on to Section 2, Bait and the Forest.
One dark evening, our peddler knocks on the door of this little gray cottage. And surprise, instead of the usual doors slammed in his face, the old man living there, who used to be a crofter over at Ramjo Ironworks, actually welcomes him in. The guy is incredibly generous. He gives him porridge, carves off a big slice of tobacco, and they even play this card game called Mulus. But here is the catch. The lonely crofter starts bragging about earning 30 kroner from his cow's milk, and he actually shows the peddler 3 wrinkled 10 kroner bills hanging in a leather pouch on the window frame. Well, that pouch becomes the irresistible bait. By the very next morning, the peddler smashes the window pane, steals the 30 kroner, and totally betrays the one guy who showed him real kindness.
Now, he's feeling pretty smart about this little heist, so he turns off the public highway to avoid the authorities and heads straight into the woods. But this forest is massive and confusing. He walks and eventually realizes he's just been walking in circles. And then the terrifying realization hits him. He took the bait. The entire forest, with its thickets and fallen logs, is suddenly closing in on him like an impenetrable prison that he can never, ever escape.
If we trace this literal and metaphorical descent on our timeline here, we follow him from the perceived safety of the public highway to the great cottage, and then all the way down into that confusing, freezing forest where he literally thinks he's going to die. Finally, hearing this hard, regular thumping of a hammer, he summons his absolute last bit of strength and staggers toward the glowing fires of the Ramjo Ironworks.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Ramjo Ironworks.
All right, inside the forge, it is chaotic. You've got groaning bellows, cracking coal, a roaring waterfall outside. But notice the stark contrast in how people react to our peddler. Master Smith Sternstrom and his apprentice? Absolute indifference. They barely even deign to glance at the vagabond. But the owner, the ironmaster, is doing his nightly inspection. He walks right up, pulls off the man's slouch hat, and completely mistakenly identifies him as an old regimental comrade, a guy he calls Niels Olof. And the language here brilliantly highlights the social dynamics at play. The peddler had quietly eased his way up to the furnace, right? And when he asked to stay, the master smith just nodded a haughty consent without even speaking a single word. But the ironmaster, genuinely believing this poor vagabond is his old friend Nils Olaf, immediately assumes things have gone downhill for him since the military, and practically demands he come home with him for Christmas. But the crucial thing here is the peddler's reaction. He knows for a fact he is not Nils Olaf. Plus, he's got 30 stolen kroner burning a hole in his pocket. So he refuses the invitation over and over, because in his mind, going up to the manor house would be like throwing himself, quote, voluntarily into the lion's den. He just wants to sleep by the warm forge and sneak away unnoticed. Let's head into Section 4, Christmas at the Manor. Well, the ironmaster doesn't take no for an answer, so he sends his daughter, Edla Wilmanson. Now, Edla is modest and shy, but she is incredibly perceptive. She immediately notices the man is terrified, and she guesses he's either stolen something or broke out of jail. But despite that, she speaks to him with such deep compassion, promising him he can leave whenever he wants. And her grace just completely gives him confidence. He actually accepts a heavy fur coat from the valet, rides to the manor, and then the valet totally cleans him up. We're talking a bath, a haircut, and a shave. And here is the massive turning point. The next morning, the Iron Master looks at his guest. Now, in the dark forge, making a mistake was easy, but in broad daylight, seeing this guy in a starched collar and whole shoes, it is incredibly obvious this is not his old army buddy. The Iron Master's brow puckers, and he thunders this exact question. What does this mean? So the whole Cinderella story comes to a crashing halt. The peddler doesn't even try to hide it. His defense is simply that he only ever begged to stay in the forge. He never pretended to be anyone else. When the Iron Master threatens to call the sheriff, the peddler actually slams his fist on the table. He warns the Iron Master about the world being a rat trap, telling him that one day he might reach for a piece of pork and get caught too. The Iron Master thinks that's kind of funny, but still tells him to get out. But right then, Edla intercedes. She literally closes the door. She argues that this man is chased away everywhere he goes, and she insists he gets to enjoy just one single day of peace, a true Christmas cheer.
And that brings us to our final section, the captain's redemption.
So Christmas Eve actually passes really quietly. The peddler basically just sleeps and eats, and they treat him with absolute dignity. But man, the tension totally spikes on Christmas morning. The Iron Master and Edla head out to early church services, and they hear the gossip. An old crofter was robbed by a vagabond selling rat traps. They instantly know exactly who is sleeping in their guest room. They rush back to the manor, with the Iron Master cynically wondering aloud how many silver spoons are even going to be left in their cupboards. But here's the twist. They get back, and the valet tells them the stranger has left, and he didn't take a single thing. Instead, he actually left a package for Edla. When she opens it, she gives a little cry of joy. Inside is a small rat trap, the stolen 30 kroner, asking her to return it to the crofter, and this incredibly poetic letter. He writes that because she treated him like a real captain, he wanted to act like one in return. He says the rat trap is a Christmas present from a rat who would have been caught in this world's rat trap if he had not been raised to captain, which gave him the power to clear himself. And look at how he signs it, Captain von Stolly. He literally takes on the identity of the noble man they treated him as. By signing it this way, he proves that Edla's genuine respect and love successfully awakened his essential goodness. He was treated with grace, and it completely transformed him from a cynical thief into an honorable man. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this pretty profound thought. We all face the temptation of the bait, right? And we all risk building impenetrable prisons of our own bitterness. But what if our understanding, our grace toward others, are actually the only things capable of unlocking those traps? What if treating someone as who they could be is exactly what gives them the power to actually become it? Keep that in mind the next time you encounter someone plodding along the road.